Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of EverydayFI, where I, your host, Meghan Combs, get to explore the lives and stories of everyday people in the financial independence community. Today on the show, I'm chatting with Keith, a former skydiver for 22 years who retired through his real estate investments and now spends most of his time traveling to see all his FI friends. If you've ever been to one of the CampFIs, you may actually recognize his voice from the numerous talks he's given. Listen in for more. Hey, Keith. How are you doing today?
Hey, Megan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome. So for anybody who doesn't know, I probably said this in my intro, but I'm going to say it again. Keith and I have met twice at CampFI. And if anybody doesn't know Keith, you probably would by his attendance to basically every CampFI ever since they've been existing. So yeah, he's an alumni or alumnus or whatever the male term of alumni is of CampFI. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Keith, for those people who don't know who you are.
Well, I've been in the FI community for a few years now. And as Megan said, I've been to lots of CampFIs in the last few years, and Economy and FI Freedom Retreat and Camp Mustache and a whole bunch of other things. I just really get my social battery charged by going and hanging out with like-minded people. I reach FI through real estate. So I have a real estate portfolio of rental properties in Illinois and Florida. And for the last probably year and a half, I've been realizing my lifelong dream of just traveling the world and hanging out with friends.
Yeah, and you have been regaling all of us with your travel. Before we hit record, we were talking about where we were right now. And I said that I was coming to where you are in Colorado in September. And you're like, oh, sorry, I won't be here. I'll be in Cambodia, which was awesome. And I was like, well, fine. Yeah, I love how much you love to travel. What made you want to do that more often? Because you said you just started doing that recently. What made you start traveling more and internationally traveling more?
Well, since I was a kid, I've always had this dream of like, okay, I'm going to retire and then I'm going to go see the world. I don't want to just be trapped in my small town in Illinois. And I was working hard to get to FI and get to the point of being able to go travel. And then it occurred to me about 2 years ago that like, oh, well, I've gotten to that point. I can go travel now. And so I started with traveling around the US, which I've done extensively in the past. And then our friend Amy asked me a couple years ago, she's like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing in Bali, this retreat in Bali. Do you want to come and participate? I was like, yeah, of course I do. So that started my international travel and flew over there and then hung out in Southeast Asia in Bali, Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos for about 4 months last winter. And then came back here and did a whirlwind of stuff throughout the US. And then in July, I'm leaving again to go back over to Southeast Asia and I'm going to do Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Australia, and Bali, and possibly the Philippines if I can squeeze it in.
That's amazing. So was the trip that you went to in Bali, that 4-month trip in Southeast Asia, was that the first time you'd ever traveled internationally?
No, I've gone internationally a few times in the past. I was in a skydiver for 22 years, and while I was there, a bunch of my friends were over there teaching people in Dubai how to skydive. So I went over there to visit them for a few weeks. And then I've done some trips to Europe and Mexico and Puerto Rico. But this was my first time in Asia and I enjoyed it a lot. So I'm going to go back and check off all the things that I didn't see last time. And then there's the whole rest of the world to go see in the coming years.
Do you want to go to like every single country?
No, I mean, there's some countries that I don't really care about. I'm not opposed to any particular country, but like I have no interest in going to South Africa. Like I'm sure it's cool, but like it's just not on my radar. And there's some countries in Europe that I've been to before that like they were nice, but like there's like if I run out of other cool places to go, I'm sure they're nice places to go and check out on my own. But I've got a lot of other places I want to go before I do those.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's like you have to prioritize countries, right? Because
Yeah.
there's only so many hours in the day and life and years that you have. So yeah, I'm with you there. I'm one of those people who, when I travel, I sometimes go back to the same places. Like I've been to Paris 3 times. I feel like I have this aspect of my personality where I'll get to like a comfort zone,
Mhm.
and then that's where I kind of stick to. And it's the same with travel, even though travel is a lot of times outside people's comfort zone. I tend to like to go back to the same places I went to, but
Yeah.
it's because when you go for a week or whatever that you get, it doesn't feel like enough. I would love to
Yeah.
just go and live in one of those countries for, 6 months or something. Recently on the podcast, I just had somebody, Christina, who is like full-time nomad, like
Mhm.
hasn't been in the United States for decades, or I think it was decades.
Yeah.
And that's what she does, is she just lives full time in all of these different countries, but she bounces around a lot. And her life is really cool. I'm going to link in the show notes to that episode. It's an awesome one if anybody has not listened to it yet. And yeah, I'm I was in awe of her lifestyle. I don't know if I would be brave enough to do that, but
She and I were hanging out in Thailand last winter, and yeah, I don't know that I could just be a full-time nomad like that, although I kind of am right now. But like, I like to come back to the U.S. and see my friends in the U.S., and I don't think she gets back to the U.S. very often. She's just moves from one place to another. But I agree
yeah.
with her on the slow travel. Like, I took a trip a few months ago where we were in Europe and we're moving every couple of days, and like we were seeing things and then moving on, and that's not really my style of travel. I prefer to go somewhere and be there for like a few weeks or a month and really like get to know the area then before moving on. I have problems with memory and concentration from my accident. And so if I see somewhere too quickly, then I might as well not have seen it. Like I need to get there and like absorb it a little bit in order for me to really remember it and have an impact on my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody in the audience who's like, okay, skydiver and accident, what the heck? Why aren't we talking about this? Don't
Mhm.
worry, we will. But I want to talk travel first. And then I also want to dive into your money story, like your earliest money story as a kid. But before we do that, I want to round out this travel talk. So, the cool thing about being able to do slow travel is that is like one of the superpowers that you get when you reach financial freedom, because a lot of us who have 9 to 5s have
Mhm.
very set PTO that we can take, right? I mean, my partner, he just left this job, thank goodness, but he only had, I think, 10 to 15 days a year. And that was it. I mean,
Oh, wow.
15 days. And then I think it was 3 sick days. And that was it. And
Wow.
that's
That's painful.
including I know. And that's including like having to visit family and doing like holiday things. So he
Mhm.
usually got maybe a week to do some big travel outside of like family obligation stuff. And so we had to pick and choose, because he's a rock climber and he loves doing that. So he loves to go out and rock climb, in like Yosemite and, all of those places out west that we don't have here in North Carolina.
Mhm.
And we have to either do that or go to Europe or wherever. And it's so difficult because, we went to Scotland that last May, not this prior May, but 2023. And our flight got canceled on the way there. So we missed like a day and a half of being
Oh, wow.
there. It
Yeah.
sucked. It sucked. I was like,
Yeah.
oh man, because we couldn't get enough. Like, I was like, we did not spend enough time in this country. And so Scotland
Yeah.
is definitely one of those I'm going back to. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of the superpowers that you get when you're financially free. So I love that. But
If
okay.
you come back to
So
Scotland, August of 25, there's a group that's Amberley rented a house with 10 bedrooms. And so a bunch of 5 people are getting together and just like hanging out in Scotland for a couple of weeks. So you should come out.
yes, I would love to do that. I actually need to join Amberly's group. And can you remind me, the group's name is
FinTalks.
FinTalks? Thank you. Yeah, I really need to join FinTalks. I haven't yet, but I will. I promise, Amberly, if you're listening, I promise I will join. It is on my to-do list, and I will link that, of course, in the show notes as well.
Cool.
Cool. Yeah, I'm down for August 2025.
Nice.
Okay, cool. So now we've talked about travel. I can't get enough of that topic. I love it. I want to
Yep.
switch to talking about your money story and some of your like history with money and how you grew up with money and things like that. So what is one of your earliest money memories? Can you talk about that?
I have a bunch, but I think the one that stands out in my mind is when I was a kid. I don't remember how I was, like probably like 8, and my grandparents took me out to breakfast, as grandparents often do. And I got the pigs in a blanket, which is just sausage wrapped in pancakes. As an adult, you're like, all right, it's just sausage and pancakes. But as a kid, that was just like this spectacular, magical breakfast. And I enjoyed it. I ate it all up. And when the bill came, my grandfather looked at the bill and he's like, why does some damn kid need to have pigs in a blanket? Apparently, they're more expensive than just sausage and pancakes. And I took from that, like, all right, well, I'm not allowed to, like, I've got to be careful of how much money I'm costing other people. And that really stuck with me. I want to make sure I pay my way. I want to make sure that I don't cost other people money. And it's really been sort of a thread that's followed me throughout the rest of my life. Now
Yeah.
that was sort of a negative feeling that I took, sort of I don't know if you can call it a positive thread from it. But then I've also had other positive money memories of, I remember when I think I was like 18 or 19, and I won the lottery and I won $70. And that was enough money to go buy a helmet for my motorcycle. And I was all excited. I was going to drive up to the gas station and cash it in. And my parents were like, no, the money's still going to be there tomorrow. You're too amped up right now. You're not driving in your current state. And I was like, oh, yeah, the money's always going to be there. So that's another lesson that I took from my elders.
Yeah, that second one sounds like a better one. Also, when you said you won the lottery, I was like, what? Which one? I thought you meant like millions of dollars, but then you said 70, and I forgot that lotteries sometimes are like the $70 ones. Uh, yeah, that first story is interesting that, your grandfather said that. And I mean, because how much more expensive really probably was it? Like a couple dollars, right?
Yeah,
And
it was
yet,
probably like $1 at the time.
yeah. And so what kind of ramifications do you think that had throughout your life? Like I know you said that you feel like you have to, pay your way and make sure you're not a burden on others. Do you have like an example of how you've seen that kind of play out in your life as an adult?
Well, for example, I always make sure that, like, I always make sure that there's a backup to a backup. So I have a credit card that I intend to use for a daily activity, but then I've also got a second credit card from a different bank in case that first one doesn't work for some reason. And then I have cash hidden in different places, like in my car and stuff, so that worst case scenario, like if the two credit cards don't work, then I've got cash. Or if I'm out of cell phone range and I can't use Apple Pay, I can at least buy gas for my car to get home. So always make sure that I will never have to like borrow money from people or be in a case where I can't pay for what I need.
Has there ever been a situation where you did need to borrow money from somebody and it made you feel a certain way?
Yeah. So I had this best friend through high school, and she moved down. I grew up in Illinois. She moved down to Texas. And so I went down to Texas to visit her and her family. And I'd been there for like 5 days or a week or something. And I wanted to take the family out to dinner to, like, show my appreciation. And so we all went out to dinner and I gave them my debit card to pay for it. And the debit card was declined. And this is back before we had cell phones, so I couldn't just call the card company. And the cash I had on hand was like $18 or something like that, which is not enough to treat. There was like 8 or 9 people to dinner. And so her mom had to pay for dinner, like the dinner that I was taking the family out to. I had to borrow money from her mom to pay for it. And I paid her back, but like I was like, all right, this will never happen again. I will never be in a situation where I can't pay if I say I'm going to pay. Like, one of my core principles is like, then I'm a man of my word. If I say I'm going to do something, then I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that I can live up to that promise.
So, one thing I want to try real quick is a small exercise of role reversal. So, say you had a friend who took out you and a group of your friends and their card was declined. Would you see that person differently, do you think? Or would you feel a certain way about them? How would you feel
No,
about that?
no, I would feel embarrassed for them. Like, oh, I'm sorry that happened to you. Like, let me smooth this over so that it's not an issue for you, and we'll figure it out later. So I know that most people would react to it in the way that I would. It was just like, oh yeah, no problem, we'll figure this out. I also know that my friend's mother was very judgmental, and having to borrow money from her made her very angry and think less of me. I
Oh, well,
don't think that most people are going to have that problem.
yeah, so that's unfortunate, and I'm sorry that you went through that. Yeah, it's one of those things where I like to think of it like sometimes we have these judgments for ourselves,
Hmm.
yet when we like looked at other people in the same way, we would not judge them the same as harshly, right? We're all our own worst critics. So that's
Oh,
why I kind of
absolutely.
wanted to do that. But it's interesting that this mother did judge you very harshly in a very similar way that you were kind of judging yourself. So it's like she was just perpetuating those feelings. And I'm really sorry you went through that. I mean,
Yeah.
I understand. This isn't exactly the same, but when I was younger, I didn't really know how debit cards worked. And I got to a point where I overdrafted like 10 times and like a $35 fee
Yeah.
every single time. So it was like $350. And my dad flipped out and like basically was like, "You are the worst with money," and just like freaking out. And just so
Yeah.
that was one of my earlier money memories that like, and I have never like overdrafted since because
Mhm.
of how horrible I felt about myself. Like my self worth was affected because of that. And it's
Yeah.
so interesting how we tie money so closely to our self worth.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and I'd love to talk more about that in these conversations because I feel like we've got to get away from that because it's not at all tied together. So, another question I have about your background, like how did your parents talk about money with either each other or you or your siblings or other family members?
My parents are very, I think, very common. They were very close to the vest. Like, we didn't like, they didn't talk to my brother and I about the family finances at all. Like, as far as we knew, like, just like things were getting paid, we didn't have to worry about it. My dad suffered an accident when I think I was 8 years old. And so he was out of work for a while. And my brother and I couldn't tell the difference. Obviously, like, looking back at it, I'm like, oh, yeah, I can see the way that they were like scrimping and saving and things were different, but like they didn't put that burden on us. It was just always like, just don't even think about it, don't worry about it. But they also encouraged my brother and I to save. So like any sort of like graduation, anything that people would give us like cash gifts, we got to keep a little bit of it as spending money, like maybe like 5 or 10% of it as spending money, and the rest of it went into a savings account. And then when we were leading up to high school, it was made clear to us, like starting in like sixth or seventh grade, like when you get out of eighth grade, you're going to have a job because you need to pay for your own clothes and books and any kind of fun you want to have. Like they took care of the tuition and food and housing and all the other stuff. But like if we wanted to go out and have any kind of fun, we had to pay for it. And then we also had to pay for our clothes and books at school. And so we would work and save up money and then go shopping. And like while my friends were buying the latest, Z Cavarici designer, whatever, like I was getting what was on sale because that's what I could afford. And in hindsight, like I don't remember the clothing that I was wearing. I don't remember like having other people judge me for the clothing that I was wearing. But at the time, I was like very self conscious about like I'm wearing the bargain bin stuff and my friends are wearing the really fancy stuff. But that also taught me like if I can't afford it, if I don't have the money to pay for it, then I can't have it. It's not I learned very early on like you work for your money pays for the things and you don't have the things if you don't earn the money for them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So your parents made you and your brothers and siblings get a job at ninth grade. So when you were 14, is that right?
Yeah. So I started working after seventh grade, like delivering flyers around the neighborhood and stuff like that. And then kept doing those sorts of odd jobs until I think in Illinois, you could be 15 and get a worker's permit, but you can only work certain hours. So I started doing that. And then at 16, you can work however many hours you want and everything. So yeah, just working different odd jobs. I was a babysitter. I delivered flyers. I sold candy door to door and magazines and stuff like that until I was old enough to go get a real job.
Did your parents ever explain to you why you needed to get a job at this age? Or did they just say, because I said so?
No, I mean, like they said, like, listen, we're going to pay for your tuition and you're going to pay for everything else. And so, in order to pay for everything else, you have to get a job. And so we're just like, all right, well, that's just how life is. Like, it didn't occur to me that this was different than my friends. Like, my friends were also delivering flyers and stuff, but like, they weren't having to buy their own clothes and books in high school. So yeah, it wasn't anything unusual in my circle of friends to be working and trying to like make your own spending money. And then there were a few times that like if I hadn't saved up enough money for clothes or books or whatever, my parents would like bridge that gap. Or every now and then, like I want to go out with my friends and I didn't quite have enough money, so my dad would like slip me a 20 and have me go out with my friends. So like they made sure that we were okay, but like it was very much we had the eye for responsibility above all other things.
And what do you think about that experience of having to work so young and having to cover very necessary expenses like your books and your clothes and things like that? And I say necessary because many times teenagers get jobs just for like the fun money, right? It's not
Mhm.
necessary expenses that the parents would pay for. And so I'm curious, like, what that experience taught you, and has it kind of permeated through your adulthood in some way?
I think it was definitely a positive influence. I definitely had a lot more feeling of like independence and responsibility from doing that. And it gave me sort of the feeling of like I'm responsible for making this happen. Like it's up to me if this happens. And if I want the nice things. I mean, there were also times that I would want to go out and do something and my friends couldn't because they didn't have the money. And I was like, well, I've got like I decide what I can afford to do and what I can't afford to do. And yeah, so it definitely gave me a feeling of responsibility that I think has led through my into my adult life. And I've always been frugal and careful with my money. Not careful as far as like I know that I don't like checking balancing my checkbook, so I haven't balanced my checkbook since I left my parents' house 30 plus years ago. So I always just make sure that I have enough money to do what I want to do. And it taught me that like if I want to do something, then figure out some sort of side hustle or some sort of extra way to earn the money so that I will have what I need to be able to do what I want to do. And that's even today when I've got, the properties are generating enough income to fully support myself. If I want to go do something extra, then sometimes I'll go and figure out something that I can do to make up a little bit of extra money so I don't have to touch the standard income.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess this kind of accumulates into, how did your upbringing shape your financial philosophies as an adult?
I would say like, it was a very positive influence on everything. Like my parents always told me, you can be whatever you want. And so I went into life thinking like, oh, anything is possible. And I've done many things that friends and family have been like, oh, I could never do that. I'm like, well, yeah, you could, but I have. And my parents taught me financial responsibility, like always have some money in savings, always have an eye on the future. And those have really influenced how I've gone. My dad, when I was a little kid, used to say that he wished he would have bought property when he was young so he could retire on it when he was old. And so I bought property and kept buying property. And now I'm basically living my dad's dream of living on the income from the properties. And yeah, I've talked to him about it a lot. And he's just so excited that I'm doing what he always wished he would have done.
That's incredible. Do you bring your dad in on any of the transactions or involve him in any way? Just
Um,
talking details with him?
so they helped me financially with my first couple of properties. They lent me some money and then, I paid them back within a year or whatever. And even now, I call my dad probably less often now that I've got a management company handling everything. but I used to call my dad on a regular basis and be like, "Hey, I'm dealing with this problem with this house. What's your opinion? How do I handle this?" My dad was a plumber for most of my life, so I ask him a lot of plumbing questions, but I'll also ask him questions, other topics of just like, "Hey, I'm remodeling this building, and this is the kind of setting I'm thinking about going with. What do you think of it?" Or things like that. So yeah, I get his input a lot of the stuff. And my mom was a bookkeeper for most of my life, and so I've asked her a lot of questions on like my bookkeeping and everything. I probably haven't had to ask her about that stuff in a few years because I got everything set up and now everything is pretty much on autopilot. But I was definitely leaning on her a lot for input on my filing system and my bookkeeping and all of that.
Those sound like really excellent resources. I love it when your parents are like a resource for you. My dad's a lawyer and a nurse, and then my mom's an accountant. So I'm like, woohoo, I have like
Yeah.
the trifecta of
Yeah.
resources. So yeah, I hit them up for things all the time instead of, paying a lawyer or an accountant. I'm so happy that you have such a great relationship with your parents and that their upbringing influenced you so positively. And I know this about you already, that you definitely love to take a positive spin on almost everything. And I think that's really encouraging. And I encourage a lot of people in the audience to try and do the same thing, because sometimes somebody who might have had the exact same upbringing as you might have gone a completely different direction, right? And maybe had become resentful or, thought, oh, I could have had designer clothes if my parents had done this, that, or the other thing, right? So I really enjoy hearing your perspective and how positive it is. And it's very refreshing. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm finally going to give the audience probably what they want. We're going to talk about your skydiving. So you said that your family said that, did things that they were like, oh my God, I could never do this. And I'm guessing you're talking about the skydiving. And so I want to know, how did you get into this? When did you start it? How long did you do it for? And yeah, just give me some details.
So I was a computer trainer back in my 20s. And one of my coworkers and friends had just started skydiving. And so he invited a bunch of us to come out and give it a try. And so a bunch of us signed up and we were jeering each other about like, oh, you're going to chicken out. No, you're going to chicken out. And then Saturday morning came and I drove out there, and turns out that I was the only one who actually showed up. Everybody else decided that they had alphabetized their M&Ms or something that day.
Oh, that's hilarious. I would be one of those people who didn't show up, by the way.
So I did my jump that day, and I actually did 2 jumps that day. I landed, and as soon as you land, they're like, "You want to do it again?" I'm like, "Well, of course I want to do it again." And so I did it a second time, and then to the next year, and I was like, "No, I can't go anywhere near this because I know if I jump again, I'm going to fall in love, and I'm going to do this for the rest of my life." And so my friend kept trying to get me to come out and give it a try, and he finally tricked me. About a year later, he said, "Hey, we're going up to set this record up in Michigan. Do you want to come up and just like hang out?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I'm not going to fall in love with skydiving in Michigan. That can only happen in Illinois." So I went up there and watched them, and I started the student program the next weekend, and then kept skydiving for the next 22 years. And I actually stopped skydiving at the end of 2022. I had exactly 3,500 jumps when I was done jumping, which is a good deterrent because it's very easy for people to like, "Hey, you want to go do a jump?" And when it's an odd number, you'd be like, "Yeah, I'll do one more. What's the harm?" But like now that I'm at 3,500, like one more means that I end at 3,501, which isn't as cool of a number. And so I need to do like 500 jumps in order to get to a cool number again. And I know I'm not going to do that many. So it's easy to refrain from the excitement of it.
Yeah, I can't relate because I'm terrified of heights, but that's so cool that you just were like, I love this, so I'm going to make it my career for 22 years. And so why did you stop?
I stopped because I was going to start traveling back in like 2019 or 2020. But towards the end of my skydiving career, I was a videographer, which means I climb on the outside of the plane, the team gets in the door, and then as they jump out, I follow them out and keep them in frame. And then we land, and I show the video to the judges in competition or to them when they're practicing. And I was going to start traveling in like 2019, And a team called me up and they were like, "Hey, you want to be our videographer this year?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." I'm like, all right, well, we train like every other week. And so I could never go very far in my travels because I always had to be back for the skydiving. And then so after a couple of years of that, I was like, no, I want to go travel the world. I want to go slow travel where I'm gone for months at a time. And the only way to know that I can do that is to stop skydiving completely. Because with skydiving, there are people who will come and do a couple of jumps a year. And in my opinion, that's kind of dangerous. Skydiving is one of those things that it needs to be muscle memory and you need to be really good at it or get out of it completely. Because if you're not 100% sure of what you're doing and how to respond to emergencies and everything, you can be dangerous not only to yourself, but to other people. And so I thought, all right, well, if I'm going to go travel, then it needs to be just travel and not skydiving.
Yeah, that makes sense. And part of your skydiving journey, there was an accident, correct? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? I've heard it before, but it's incredible to me that you went through this and then continued to skydive after that, from what I understand.
So in 2006, I was doing a jump with a guy, and I'd been doing the thing about skydiving is that it's really safe if you do it correctly. It's like crossing the street. If you get to the curb, you look left and you look right, and there's no traffic, you can cross that street as many times as you want. But if you just close your eyes and run, there's a good chance you're going to get hit by a car eventually. Well, skydiving is the same way. If you're careful and do everything in a measured capacity, then you can do it many times without any problems. One of the problems is that the more experience you get with skydiving, the more you want to kind of push the envelope. And I was pushing the envelope a little bit, and I was doing an approach where you accelerate towards the ground and then you plane out and you turn that vertical speed into horizontal speed along the ground. And one of the jumps, I had put on a weight belt to fall down faster with the person I was jumping with, and they didn't account for that in my approach. So instead of skimming along the ground gently, I pounded into the ground and I broke a lot of bones and got some brain damage and woke up in the hospital a few days later. Luckily for me, I don't remember the accident happening at all. I remember getting to the drop zone on Friday and then waking up in the hospital on Wednesday, and the accident happened on a Sunday. So I'm fortunate in that I don't remember the actual accident happening, but then I spent 18 months in the wheelchair and then quite a few years trying to recover from the physical injuries and the brain damage. And I still have some side effects from it today, but I've got systems in place to deal with those. As one example, some days I wake up and I call it my brain is a little slow, like everything is sort of foggy. I get disoriented very easily. And so I think I told you before this, like if that happens, we're gonna have to reschedule. Luckily today I'm feeling okay, so we're able to go through with this. But yeah, I kind of know what my limitations are and just adjust to those limitations on the days that I need to.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it's really incredible to me that you have zero ego when it comes to that, that you're like, I know my limitations and I'm going to respect my body and what it's telling me while also putting in place, systems that help you live a normal life. So I absolutely love that. You've given several talks at CampFI about this journey, and then also the systems you put in place. And it's just, and then the way that you look at the world, and you're one of the most inspiring people to me, in my opinion. And it makes me wonder, like, so you went through this traumatic experience. I mean, the fact that you can't remember it is good, but you do remember the 18 months of recovery. So what made you go back to skydiving after that extensive recovery and that really bad accident?
Well, because I knew, like, even from the moment I woke up in the hospital, I knew that it wasn't some unforeseen danger that had put me in this place. It wasn't that the canopy or the parachute failed to work. It wasn't that any of the equipment or other people were at fault for my accident. I knew that I had done something that I shouldn't have done, and I paid the consequences for it. One thing that I did is I have never jumped with a weight belt since then, even when I went back to skydiving. And I would have teams that were like, well, you need to put on a little weight to follow with us. I was like, then I won't jump with you because I absolutely will not jump with a weight belt. And when I was jumping in the later years, I had two rigs and they were exactly identical so that when I jumped out of a plane, I knew exactly what equipment I was wearing, how it would respond, how the parachute would fly, how the jumpsuit that I was wearing felt, the fit of the rig. Everything was the exact same on every jump that I did. And instead of worrying about the variables that I might change, I just made sure that none of the variables ever changed. And so I knew that skydiving it wasn't a dangerous sport for me to participate in. I just had to do things that I wasn't going to make the mistakes to put myself in danger.
Are you ready to take control of your financial future? Do you want to learn how to set powerful goals and invest wisely? Have you been yearning to quit your 9 to 5? Then my workbook, Your Journey to Freedom, is for you. This workbook is your roadmap to financial success. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out, it's designed to help you define your goals, create a plan, and take action towards building wealth. Inside, you'll find practical exercises and tools that will help you identify your short, medium, and long-term financial goals, develop a personalized investment strategy tailored to these goals and your risk tolerance, track your progress and stay accountable to your financial objectives. Plus, there's bonus content like a quiz to test what you learn and a budget worksheet. With easy-to-follow instructions and insightful prompts, this workbook will empower you to make confident decisions and stay focused on your financial journey. Don't let another day go by without taking charge of your financial life. Invest in yourself and your future with the Your Journey to Freedom workbook. Order now and start turning your dreams into reality. Visit my website at everyday-fi.com/guides to get your copy today and start your journey to financial freedom. Are you going to go back to skydiving after you're finished with your long-term travels?
Well, I've thought about this a lot, and there are so many wonderful things in the world to do that I didn't try while I was skydiving every summer and most of the winter that I'm going to go try all of those. And if I run out of fun things to do, then maybe I'll get back into skydiving, but I'm not planning on it. Like I've sold all of my gear. I'm still in contact with a lot of my friends that I made in skydiving. And I have no problem like going to the drop zone and watching them having fun and hearing their stories and seeing their videos. And I don't feel jealous of what they're doing because I'm off doing other amazing things that they're not doing because they're skydiving all summer. So yeah, I never say never, but I don't plan on getting back into skydiving. Like I don't really miss it. I did it for 22 years and had a lot of memorable skydives. And maybe if I live to 200, I'll run out of things to do and I'll get back into skydiving. But I don't see any need to do that instead of the other fun things that there are in the world.
Well, here's hoping you live to 200 so you can skydive again. Cool. Okay. So now I want to know how you came to find the financial independence movement. So I know you said that you bought properties when you were younger because you wanted that income to kind of sustain your life. And I know that you said that kind of idea came from your dad, but how did you specifically find the FI community? Was it through real estate investing or was it through something else?
Well, I mean, ever since I was probably in my late teens or early 20s, I was reading books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Your Money or Your Life, those sorts of books. And then I really found it with the real estate. I found out about Bigger Pockets and then listened to those podcasts for the real estate and then started listening to the Bigger Pockets Money podcast. And they were talking about Mr. Money Mustache. So I went and started reading his blog and then fell down the rabbit hole that many of us have fallen down of, seeing his blog and then reading other blogs and picking up on other podcasts. And I had heard of Chautauqua and CampFI, and I thought, oh, I can't afford to go to those right now. And then one day I was like, you know what, I can afford to go to one. And so I looked up and there was a CampFI that was going to be happening in Minnesota. It was like a 6 or 8 hour drive away from me, like a month or two after I started looking it up. So I was like, oh yeah. So I signed up for that. And up until that point, I was like, I would read the forums every now and then. I was listening to podcasts, but I wasn't really participating, and I didn't know what to expect. And I went to that first CampFI, and this was in 2021, so we were still kind of bouncing back from COVID. And I think we had 32 people in the camp, and I talked to every single one of them, and it was like going from a life where like I didn't have anybody to talk to about this stuff to a weekend where I had 32 people or 31 other people to talk about this stuff. And I was just, I felt like I was vibrating with excitement. And with every talk and every conversation, I was like writing notes and everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, these are my people. And so after that, I was listening to more podcasts and I was like, oh, I'm going to go to another one. And I went to the one in Florida in January, and I was driving Diana Miriam, picked her up at the airport, and she was like, you know what? I think I'm going to go to every CampFI this year. I was like, that's a great idea. Me too. So that year I went to all of them except for the one in Texas. And I didn't go to that one because Skydiving Nationals was going on that same weekend, and I'd already committed to my team. And so then after that, like in the last 2 years, I've been like, well, I'm going to keep going to a lot of them because I really enjoy going to all these CampFIs, plus all the other events, the economy and Five Freedom Retreat in Bali, and Amberly's got her FinTalks things, and there's probably a dozen others that I'm forgetting about that I enjoy going to.
Yeah. And so, okay. So do you go to every CampFI now, like every year?
No, so I go to a CampFI every year. I think this is going to be the first year that I go to the least, and I'll have gone to 4 CampFIs this year. I went to the one in Florida in March, and then road tripped up to Economy. And then, of course, we saw each other at Mid-Atlantic in Virginia. And then I'm going to both of the ones in Rocky Mountain out here in Colorado. I'm in Colorado right now, going out to both of those this year. Sad that I've gone to the one in Midwest in Minnesota. It's kind of got a dear place in my heart because it was the first one I went to. I'm going to miss it this year because I'll be in Asia already at that point.
Oh, bummer. You'll be
Yeah.
in Asia.
Yeah. Sitting on a beach in Thailand instead of going to CampFI.
Man.
The struggles, Life has its trade-offs.
It does. Champagne problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally feel you with CampFI. Like, it's for anybody who hasn't gone yet, just shell out the money. It is totally worth it because you will find your tribe, and definitely know that you will probably not get a lot of sleep because there's just so much to do and talk about, and people, stay up. And even the roommate you had, like I was rooming with Annie this last one. And if audience, if you've been listening, she was one of the 3 people I interviewed live at CampFI. And she and I would just talk until like freaking midnight. And it was so much fun. Yeah. And yeah, she's now one of my people. Like, I love her, and I really want to visit her in Philly. And yeah, it's like you find all these new friends that, oh, I never knew you existed. And now we're like best friends, and we'll just see each other at all the other, FI events. And it's just the most incredible community, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast. Like, I wanted people to hear more from all of you, because I feel like only going to these events like a few times a year is just not enough for me. Like, because this CampFI was the biggest one in Mid-Atlantic that they've ever had. And I forget how many. I think it was like 120 or 130 people. I forget.
I think it was 114 people who registered the week before it happened. So I don't know. He may have added on more people after that.
Yeah. And so that's a lot of people to try and meet. And you're not going to have deep, meaningful conversations with every single one of them. And so that's why I wanted to do this podcast, because this is what I'm doing with anybody who's willing. So I really appreciate you coming on and doing this and sharing all of this. And I am curious. So what drew you to the FIRE movement? Like you said that, we're reading these, books, and you started diving into the podcast and reading the blogs and everything. And you went to the CampFI, but why were you drawn to the financial independence movement specifically over other types of financial movements or financial communities?
Well, I've been since I was like my parents retired in their 50s. And so I've always known that I was going to retire early. Like I've never thought that I was going to work a corporate job until I was 65. And so the idea of financial independence and retire early, like the retire early kind of caught me of like, okay, I'm going to stop working and go travel before I'm 65. And then I think that there's been sort of an evolution of the fire community. Like I don't really pay attention to the RE part of it anymore. And I think a lot of people, it's more about having the financial independence is good for the freedom of choice that it gives you. Like it's not about the money. It's about having the ability to walk out of a toxic workplace instead of having to get your soul ground down while you're there. It's the ability to, when there's a problem with your car, you just get it fixed instead of limping along with it and possibly putting yourself in a danger. I can think of probably 10,000 other examples of things that the money isn't the main reason. It's what the money can do. It's the freedom that it gives you in your life and the peace that you can have in your life. The ability to, when people say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing, or I think I'm about going to a concert, to just be able to say, yeah, that sounds fun. I want to do that. I'm going to go with you instead of, oh, I can't go because I can't afford to or whatever. So just if you love your job, that's great. Still working towards financial independence so that you have the freedom to do other things in life, whether it's while you're working your job or if you decide, like, I love doing what I'm doing, but I want to do this for a nonprofit instead of for a for profit company. It just gives you so many options and so much peace to be able to make the decisions based on what you want to do rather than what you're able to do with your financial situation.
Yeah, I'm like vigorously nodding. Uh, because to me, financial independence means you get to say yes a lot more than you did before. And I'm with you on being able to work for a nonprofit versus a for profit. I talked to somebody named Ryan in episode, I believe it was 5, who's a CPA, and he was a CPA for corporations. And then when he went down the financial independence path and got to a point where he was pretty solid, he was like, I want to switch to, charity work and working for nonprofits. And so now he's a CPA for charitable organizations. He still gets paid, of course, but a lot less. But he enjoys the work so much more because it's so much more fulfilling. But
Yeah.
because he reached a certain point in his FI journey that he knew he could pull back a little bit, he was able to say yes to that opportunity. And it's something that I say this so many times, but it really is part of our superpower, is being
Yeah.
able to say yes so much more than people who are not financially independent. So, yeah. Besides travel, like, what does your life look like now? Like, what can somebody who is looking to reach financial independence expect after they stop, working full time? And I put working in quotes because, of course, owning rental properties, there's a little bit of work to that, right? But probably
Yeah.
not much.
Yeah. It's well, owning properties can be a lot of work if you do it one way. The way I've done it, I've got a management company that handles all of my long-term rentals, and then I've got a different manager for each of I've got 2 short-term rentals in different cities. So I've got people managing those short-term rentals. And I would say I have to work maybe like half an hour a week of answering an email or looking at my bank account to see if my checks have been deposited. So I've got it very hands off the way I do it right now. I know other people that have a similar number of properties or even fewer properties that they insist on managing everything themselves. And they probably are able to keep a little bit more of that income, but they trade the money that I'm paying the management company, they trade that for the freedom. So each morning I wake up and I do a set of exercises. I do some physical exercises and brain exercises to keep myself in shape. I do some journaling. I have breakfast. But I can't remember if it was yesterday or the day before. I went out and I had a phone call early in the morning because I had to talk to somebody in Asia. So I had to be up at like 5 a.m. And then after the phone call, I was like, I'm bored. I think I'm tired. I'm just going to read my book before I get my day started. And I sat down to read my book and I just read a book all day. And then I was like, well, it's time to go to bed. So, and like, I don't feel guilty for that at all because that's what we're all working towards is the ability to just make decisions in the spur of the moment and go with them. And like right now, I'm out in Colorado. I came out for CampFI, but I came out 3 weeks early because I got friends out here. And so I've gone hiking with friends. I get together for dinners or get together for tea and coffee or game nights or whatever. And it's just the freedom to hang out with people and have fun with everything. I brought my tools with me because I've got some friends that are working on their houses. And I said, oh, I'll bring my basic set of tools. And so I've helped some friends tinker around their house, and it feels good to help friends. So other than the travel, that's the sort of things that I do. I just sort of keep trying to learn, keep trying to improve my physical and mental health. I do the equivalent of physical therapy to kind of stave off some of the decline from my physical injuries. And I don't know what you would call it for the brain exercises that I do every day. I've got to do some exercises and puzzles and stuff that I think I'm doing them because I'm trying to stave off the decline from the accident. But I think that they would be really beneficial for anybody to do because I think we all kind of say like, oh, well, I'm getting older, so that's why I'm in decline. And I think there's a small part of us that declines because of our aging, but I think there's also a part of us that declines because we let it go. We're not paying attention to it as much as we can, and like any muscle that we don't exercise, it atrophies, whether that be physical or mental exercises.
Yeah, I agree. And there's so many cool apps out there now that basically gamifies those mental
Hmm.
exercises. So it doesn't really feel like work. But I feel like, again, that's, once you reach financial independence, you're able to dedicate more time to perfecting your memory and just increasing your ability to do certain tasks. Because I feel like when you're working a corporate world, you don't necessarily have the energy at the end of the day to be able to add on other mental tasks. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it's something that I can see why people might let it go or let it go by the wayside because they're like, man, I just worked all day and had to talk to people all day and had to deal with my toxic boss or toxic coworker or,
Mhm.
the 5 different hats that I had to wear or the bureaucracy of my job, whatever it is. And
Yeah.
so even like a fun little, brain teaser puzzle game can exhaust you or make you feel exhausted.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that when you reach financial independence, you have so much more space, like mentally, physically, emotionally, to be able to embrace things that are so much more healthy for you. And
Yeah.
I have heard a lot from people who are early retirees. This is not necessarily true for regular retirees, but for early retirees, they're like, after, the first 3 months where I just slept every day, I'm the
Hmm.
healthiest that I've ever been. And
Yep.
because they're not sitting there hunched over at a desk anymore,
Yep.
they're out and about, biking, hiking, walking, whatever,
Yep.
and even like reading all day. That's still really good for you
Hmm.
because it's something that promotes intelligence and thinking and learning and also creativity, depending on what kind of book you're reading. Like, I love to read fantasy. And so I'm all
Hmm.
about just like diving into those fantasy worlds. And yeah, when you said you read a book just all day without planning it, I was like, oh man, that reminds me of I was the age where all of the Harry Potter books came out as I got older. So the first book came out when I was 11, and then the last book
Oh,
came out when
wow.
I was 19. So I grew up with those books. And so I went to
Deal.
all
Yeah.
of those release parties, and then we would read the book
Hmm.
straight for like
Yeah.
the next weekend, right? And we just like wouldn't sleep. We would
Yeah.
barely eat. But it was the best. It was the
Yeah.
best. And so when you said that, I was like, oh, memories, nostalgia.
Yeah. I encourage everybody to read a little bit. If you can do it every day, that's great. 20 minutes every day or an hour on the weekends or whatever. And it doesn't matter what you're reading. It's not about reading like self-help books or learning something new. If you just read Harry Potter, while you're reading that and thinking about that fantasy world, that's going to make connections in your brain. And now you're going to solve problems that you have at home or at work or in your relationships because something absolutely unrelated to your relationship you'll read about that in the book, and then your brain will, kind of, your brain doesn't know the difference between the life that you're living and the life that you're reading about. And so when you sleep, it tries to consolidate all of that, and it kind of weaves that into the deck of your real life, and you come up with solutions. And like, I don't have any scientific evidence of what I'm saying, but I believe that, like, I feel like I've had problems in the past and I'm like, oh, this reminds me of this story, and I incorporated, I solved the problem because of, how this wizard was doing whatever. So I encourage everybody to read a book. You can read it on, you can have, there's apps on your phone. You can read paper books. You can have one of the book readers, a Kindle, or I don't know if there's other ebook readers out there. You can read it on your computer, but just read something every day if you can, every week if you're really busy, because I think that's going to improve your life in ways that you can't even fathom before you start. Like, try it for 3 months and then decide if your life is better for it or not. And like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe your life isn't better for it, but give it a 3 month trial and let me know what you find out.
Yeah, and I'm all about like if there's a book that you don't like, stop reading it. You don't have
Yeah.
to keep reading a
Right.
book because you don't like it. I mean,
Right.
I'm about to make a lot of enemies right now, but I started reading Little Women and what now, granted, I was 13 and I didn't like it, so I stopped reading it. I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of people who are like, "Oh my God, no, read it again." But
Right.
yeah, because I was like, you know what? I can't get into this book. I'm just going to switch because, reading to me needs to be enjoyable. And, people will recommend books to me and I'll say, okay, is this fiction? No. Is it fantasy? No. Okay, I'm not going to read it. Like I'm just not. Like if I want to do nonfiction content, I usually do podcasts or some sort of audio. I just absorb it a little bit better that way. But my reading time is my escape into another reality time. So I don't
Yeah.
want to, read James Clear or whatever. I freaking love James Clear, but I would rather hear him interviewed on a podcast than read his book. I'm sorry, James. But even though he's got really great insights, I'm just like, no, that's just not how I want to spend my time.
Yeah.
And for anybody who's like, oh, I don't have enough time to read. Okay. I'm going to tell you a great 5 to 10 minute time period that you probably have every day sitting on the toilet. That is where you can read, guaranteed every day.
Yeah.
And just leave your phone outside the bathroom, take your book and read in there. That's the perfect,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I thought you were going to say Audible books when you're driving to and from work. But yeah, the toilet is another good place that you can sit and read.
Well, not everybody drives to work, right? Like I work from home, so but
Yeah.
everybody is on the toilet at some point during the day.
Fair enough.
Okay, moving on. Now we talked about toilet. Okay, so we know that you reached financial independence through real estate. Was there any other way that you invested in yourself? Was it just real estate, or did you also invest in the stock market or anything else? Crypto, NFTs,
Well,
whatever.
I I bought a little crypto when it was popular. I've since invested from my crypto investments. I didn't invest a lot, so I didn't lose a lot either. I've got, like, the standard, IRA or Roth IRA. I've got some other investments through non-tax deferred accounts, but I would say the majority of my investments are the houses that I own. Probably greater than 99% of my net worth is in the properties that I own. Yeah, no, just been, they say not to put all your eggs in one basket. I say put all your eggs in one basket and just really watch that basket.
Well, and the amount of properties you have, it's not really one basket, right? Because each property is kind of its own basket in
Right.
a way, right? Yeah. Are all of the properties in one area or are they kind of spread out across the United States or across a state?
So 39 of them are in the same town within a 5-minute drive of each other. And then I have one in Florida. I bought the house in Florida because I wanted to get out of the winters in Illinois. I was there for 2 winters, and I was like, nope, I'm gonna go travel. So now, and I set it up to rent out as an Airbnb when I wasn't there, and so now I'm just not there very much in the past year and a half, and so it's been more Airbnb than living space for me. But yeah, most of them are within a 5 minute drive of each other in a farm town in the middle of Illinois.
That's incredible. And I know you said you're from Illinois. Is that why you chose that town?
I chose that town because that's where I was skydiving. And so I moved there for the skydiving, and then I started buying properties near where I lived. And next thing I knew, I had a lot of them in that town. And it's a good town. There's not any one major industry that, like, if the industry went out of business, if that company went out of business, it would ruin the town or anything. It's a bunch of smaller businesses. It's close enough to Chicago that people can drive up there to get a little bit of culture, but it's far enough away that bad traffic is when there's a train passing through town. And I've got a lot of friends that I still have out there because of the skydiving. So
That's incredible. Is Illinois your home base, or do you even have a home base? Or are you just kind of a
uh,
nomad at this point?
technically, I live in Florida now because I moved to the house in Florida and I was there for a couple of years. And that's where I go back to. Like when I came back from Asia last year, I went to Florida and hung out there for a little bit and by a little bit, I mean like a couple of weeks before I headed off on my next adventure. And then I'll probably get back there next April.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Oh, well, thank you for sharing all that. The next topic I want to talk about is your current wins and your current struggles. So, what are some of your current wins that you have accomplished lately in your life that you could share with us?
I would say the travel for the last year and a half has been a major win, and going and visiting friends. So last summer, I just bounced around from friend to friend throughout the whole summer and then flew over to Bali where I met a bunch of my friends that were over there for the retreat. And a whole bunch of us hung out before the retreat, during the retreat, and after the retreat. And then a couple of us went over to Thailand and hung out. There's, I think, 5 of us that met up in Bangkok. And then 3 of us went down to Hua Hin, which is a small town that we were in for a couple months. So I would say all the time that I've spent hanging out with friends has been a major win. The management company that's handling all my short-term rentals and then the managers that I have for my short-term rentals have made it possible for me to live the life that I'm living. I've been able to give my brother's kids some advice on job seeking and things like that. And I'm really close with my family. I've got my health. I go for a walk every morning and exercise and I do yoga. So I'm, like you were saying earlier, I'm in the healthiest shape that I've been now that that pesky job is out of the way. I could probably name 10,000 wins. I've got a car that I enjoy when I travel. When I don't want to travel, I can just go back to my house in Florida or my house in Illinois, depending on what the season is. I have points on my airlines that I can just fly to wherever I want to go or pay for hotels. You were talking about Paris. I'm actually on my way to Thailand next month. I've got an 8 hour layover in Paris that I'm trying to decide if I want to leave the airport and go see some of Paris. I've been to Paris a couple of times, but if I want to get out and see a little bit of it or just hang out in the lounges. 8 hours is kind of a long time to just hang out in lounges, but it's also kind of a short time to try to go see things in town.
Yeah, especially given the airports, both of them are almost an hour outside of the city, given the traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, that's a lot of wins, and stop rubbing it in. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's incredible. I'm so glad that things are going so well for you because you deserve it. And I love that you have so many friends that you get to spend time with. And hopefully you'll add me as one of those if you're ever in Durham, North Carolina.
absolutely.
You are welcome to come and visit me
Okay.
and my partner and our 6 cats and potentially 2 dogs, which people who are going to be hearing the edited version of this don't know that I have had to pause a couple of times to deal with said dogs. But yeah, it's fun here. So you can definitely count me as one of those because I'd love to
Cool.
see you. All right, let's go dark a little bit. Do you have any current struggles that you'd like to share and anything that you've learned from them that you can share with the community?
I would say that a lot of the struggles that I have are similar struggles that other people have. Like I have a very positive outlook on life. I think we've talked about, I've done gratitude journaling for a few years now. That doesn't mean that I'm always happy and that things are always 100% for me. I still have dark days, and I've sort of learned some habits or some practices that I can do to sort of get myself out of when I'm in the doldrums. Reach out to friends, or I found that just like going for a walk is beneficial in that, like, I don't know why it's beneficial, but like if I'm in a bad mood and I go for a walk, when I'm get back from the walk, I'm not in as bad of a mood anymore. People might say that's, because I'm getting oxygen, or I'm moving my muscles, or I'm hearing the birds sing. I don't know why it works. It just works for me. But yeah, I struggle with depression and anxiety like many people do. Like I mentioned earlier, I have slow days where my brain just doesn't seem to be working, and I get confused and disoriented rather easily. I, but like I said, I have systems for those. So I try to, stay away from people that are going to cause me more stress. If I'm having a slow brain day, then I don't go to a party because that's just going to be so overwhelming for me. I might get together with like one friend who understands and is okay with me just like talking slow, or just sitting there and not really talking to each other. I can't think of any like major struggles that I'm dealing with right now, other than like constantly trying to make sure that I'm not backsliding with my physical health and my mental health. And I stumble every now and then. I have problems. And I was talking to a friend of mine earlier that, you know, it's very common that when you're in a funk or when you're depressed, you're like, well, I don't want to burden my friends with this. I don't want to talk to other people. And obviously, we're all happy to help our friends if they're dealing with this, but we think that when it's me, I don't want to bother other people. And I've found that if I just talk to a friend, like I'll just reach out to a friend and just like talk to them about how their day is going. So I don't, my fear is that I don't want to burden other people with my problems. But if I just call and talk to them and don't talk to them about my problems, just talk to them about life in general and just have that conversation that we can have with friends on any given day. I get off that phone call, or I leave that, coffee shop where we're meeting up or whatever, and I'm just in a better mood, even though we didn't talk about my problems. We didn't solve any of my problems, but just the proximity with people and interacting with friends, I think goes a long ways towards helping when I'm going through any sort of depression or anxiety or any of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find it interesting that one of the earliest money memories you had, you mentioned you learned from that experience, the one with your grandfather kind of getting angry about the pigs in a blanket, that you didn't want to be a burden on people. And it's interesting that you're repeating that now. And as somebody who grew up very similarly, where I was also taught not to be a burden, I am right there with you. That is the last thing that I want to be on people. And I have luckily been in therapy for the last, I want to say 7 years now. And we have talked about this a lot. And I have finally been able to tell myself that I am allowed to take up space, not all the space, because of
Mhm.
course, having a relationship, it's a give and take, right? But it is okay for me to take up space and to tell people what I'm struggling with. And
Mhm.
not only because it's beneficial for me, but it also might be beneficial for them because they might be going through something similar or might have gone through something similar
Mhm.
and can relate and can actually empathize with you and not just sympathize. So to me, that's how I'm trying to see it myself rather than being a burden.
Mhm.
It's showing my friend or the person I'm close to that I trust them with this vulnerability that I am allowing to come out, and that
Yeah.
I also am allowing them to also be vulnerable with me and tell me their problems. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of how I've reframed it. And for anybody who hasn't been in therapy, like, do it. It's freaking life changing. So but I just find that interesting that that thread just came all the way full circle to almost the end of the podcast. So I just find that really, really incredible. Good job. Good. Okay, so we're coming towards the end of the interview here, but one last thing I'd like you to do is leave the audience with either a life hack, a recommendation, or a learning that you can share with us.
2 words: incremental improvement. You don't have to do it perfect the first time. You just have to get started. If you just do something and put it out there, it's not going to be perfect, but now you can see what it is and you can see what needs to be tuned up. And so tune up a little bit of it, and then the next day do a little bit more, or the next week or the next year, keep incrementally improving on what you have. When my last W-2 job, we would write curriculum, and we would often have people that would be editing a chapter and they'd say, "This is garbage. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to write it the right way." And we would tell them, "No, no, don't throw the whole thing out. Take what we have here and make it a little bit better." Because then the next person is going to take what you've done and make it a little bit better. And if we just keep making things a little bit better, then we're making progress. But if we keep throwing out what we had and trying to start fresh, then we're just treading water. We're not really getting anywhere. And I've taken that as a lesson for all aspects of my life. If I just, like, in relationships, if you interact with the other person and if it's not perfect, then that's fine. Next time, learn from what you did the previous time, and whatever you wish you would have done different last time, do that difference this time. So yeah, incremental improvement. Those are the 2 words that have revolutionized my life. And I encourage everybody else to take that mindset.
Yeah, thank you for that. I forget how Jonathan on Choose FI says it, but it's something about the like accrual of marginal gains or something like that, like some like stream of big words, but it's those 1% improvements, right? And
Mhm.
I love that you associated it with relationships, because a lot of times people think of that as things like your job, your health, personal goals
Mhm.
versus like building meaningful experiences like relationships. And even you could even relate it to like to travel. If the first time you ever travel internationally goes horribly wrong, it's okay. Like, it's
Yeah.
okay. First of all, that's going to be a good story one day. That's the
Mhm.
definition of type 2 fun, which is the exact kind of fun you always want to have. Because if anybody doesn't know what type 2 fun is, it is where you are not having fun in the moment, but it is fun to remember. And it's what a lot of outdoorsy people aim for when they go for their fun. But anyway, if the first time you do something like travel, it doesn't go perfectly, like, just try again, and learn from those experiences and make those incremental changes, like you said, because it's just going to get to a point where you're an expert at travel. And now every single travel experience that you have is going to be phenomenal. And you'll probably start aiming for that type 2 fun. You'll be like, okay, how can I make this go a little bit wrong so that it's kind of fun? So yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being here. This has been really fun. How can people reach you if they want to learn more, hear more about you, or just, be one of your friends?
I would recommend going to CampFI because I'm probably going to be there. I won't be at any more after July of this year, but I'll be at a bunch next year, I think, or Economy, or come over to Bali in 2025 for the Five Freedom Retreat. I think that's happening in September of 2025. It's an amazing experience of just like, it combines traveling internationally, experiencing another culture, and hanging out with a bunch of Fi friends and just like charging your Fi social battery. Or yeah, I think I'm usually at most of the Fi events. Or yeah, that's all I can think of right now.
No, that's perfect. So let's encourage people to go to all those events. And I'm hoping beyond hope that I can go to Bali in 2025. Obviously, it's full this year and it's sold out in like 2 hours. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that I could go next year.
I actually got
And
ticket number one this year.
wow, good job. That's amazing.
It was a badge of pride.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Well, have fun. And you're going to regale everybody with those stories, of Bali. So
Yeah.
definitely go to the CampFI as y'all so you can hear these stories. That Keith usually also does a lot of the talks at CampFI. At least that's how I know you. You did talks at both of the ones I went to. So,
Yeah.
and he's an excellent speaker. So yeah,
Oh, thank you.
y'all should go. So. All right, Keith, thank you so much for being here. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it
And
was great seeing you.
yeah, and hopefully I can have you back for another episode. Maybe we can see if you ever adopt the skydiving, or if you get to, year 200, maybe we can bring you back when you turn 200.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk before I turn 200.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for listening to the EverydayFI podcast. If you're loving the show, here are some things you can do. Number 1, subscribe in your favorite podcast player and share the show with your friends and family. Number 2, please leave a review. I'm always looking for ways to improve the show. Number 3, check out my website, EverydayFI.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and leave comments for myself and the guest. Number 4, if you're interested in sharing your own financial independence story, you can find a submission form at everyday-fi.com/podcast. And finally, number 5, join my Patreon membership for only $5 a month at patreon.com/everydayfi-podcast. This is a one-woman show, so every little bit counts. See you next time as we continue to go down the path to financial freedom.